A little more drama than we're typically accustomed to for Ohio State football on National Signing Day. A few pluses, a few minuses. We will break it all down right here at the Ohio State Buckeyes live show right here at the Voice of College Football. Right next to me is, of course, Tony Gerdeman, Buckeye Huddle, and College Football Playbook is the new channel right here on YouTube. We will drop the link in the chat, folks. You got to get on over there. Check it out. Subscribe. It's College Football Playbook right here on YouTube. Below me, Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts 247 Sports, Kevin Noon, Buckeye Huddle, and of course, the Big Me Kickoff Podcast. Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
Good.
Doing good.
Did you get any sleep? Are we rested up?
Not really.
Bourbon-fueled sleep.
Sure, those heads are full of all sorts of names and numbers and measurements, even more so than usual. So, Steve, we will start with you in regards to, as I alluded to off the top, at least based on my recollection of past National Signing Days, a little bit more drama, a flip in the good direction, a flip in the negative direction.
Yeah. No doubt about it. Obviously, there's a lot of moving parts and pieces with recruiting and National Signing Day now. And obviously, it was great that they were able to add Joshua Mickens, a defensive end from Indianapolis. Not so good that they lost Kayan Lee, who was a corner who was committed to them out of, I think, Georgia, I believe. And kind of swung both ways on them. They'd flipped Mickens from LSU previously. I just, we talked to Ryan Day for about 45 minutes yesterday, and about 20 minutes of that was on name, image, and likeness, and not as much of it on the actual players who signed with Ohio State. So, and then you go on our message boards, and they're calling the coach a loser. They're calling Gene Smith out for not embracing the new world of NIL. And so we are in a brand new paradigm here, in terms of what college football is becoming with the buying of players, it seems. And as one person who works at a Big Ten school told me, and I'm paraphrasing because he used a lot more details than I could possibly put in a public forum. And I don't mean expletives, I mean details I can't repeat. He basically said Ohio State's money game is just fine to compete in the Big Ten, but for them to try and out-recruit the likes of Auburn, Georgia, Alabama, and some of the others right now, they're just not quite up to snuff right now. So I don't know what Tony and Kevin have heard, but, this seems to be until they get some kind of rules in place on what's legal and what's not legal, and what Ohio State's willing to do and what Ohio State's not willing to do. Finishing with the number 5 recruiting class in the country used to be a pretty celebrated thing, and now it's looked down upon as, the ruination of the program. So kind of a real messy day if you really get right down to it.
It was interesting, Mark. Yesterday, me and Kevin and Mark Givler and Tom Moore were part of a 7-hour live stream of signing day. And one of the comments we got was from somebody who said, I follow Ohio State, I follow Georgia, I follow Alabama. Everybody, when they lose a recruit, they say it's because of NIL. And somebody else, paid more. And I think now it's true. So it's valid to have these complaints. But I was just watching an interview with Lincoln Keenholz, the quarterback out of South Dakota, saying that he could have gotten more money at Washington, but Ohio State sold him on betting on himself. And I'm sure they talked to him about CJ Stroud's portfolio right now, making, however many millions of dollars as a starter at Ohio State rather than taking the early money as a recruit. But Steve is right. If Ohio State's not going to get into the recruiting aspect of this as much as the rest of the country has, or the rest of the people they're competing against for these 5-star guys and even 4-star guys like Mark Fletcher, the running back that chose Miami, if you're not going to, get into that, you're going to have to hope your guys, the recruits, you're going to be relying on guys who buy into the long game. And buying into the long game is not something that many people do anymore, including us. Who has patience for anything anymore? I want it now. the fact that this show takes an hour should take 5 minutes, and it should have been on an hour ago, Mark. Like it's now. It's immediacy. And so if you have players that will take a more patient approach, I think that's good for the game. It's good for your culture, but it may not be good for the bottom line in terms of the ultimate balance of talent. And so, it's going to take a decision from Ohio State to get into this bidding aspect of it, but also it's going to take the millionaires at Ohio State to start giving money to recruits. And I don't know if we've seen any interest in them doing that at this point.
Well, if this is a 5-minute show, then goodbye, folks. We'll see you next week here on Ohio State Buckeyes Live 192. You're right. If you're going to be competing against the schools that are going to give you the money now and everything else, and it's all well and good to say, okay, well, you're betting on yourself and you're betting on, we're going to get you better developed to make the NFL millions. So you can get $1 million now, or, come here, bet on yourself, hope to pick up NIL deals while you're here, and then be better positioned for the league where the real money is. And then maybe even the second contract where the generational wealth really comes from. It's difficult. And I think that the thing is, and I mentioned this either on our 7-hour show or a little wrap-up show that we did, it's difficult for me to see, going to Gene and Norma in Waldo, Ohio, and saying, please give us $10 a month or whatever. Where is Safe Light? Where is Wendy's? Where are all these, Columbus is such a diversified economy in all these different sectors nationwide, et cetera. I mean, there has to be something better going on with the business giving, because I think that's going to be where you have companies that are already set up to have a giving arm. They give money to nonprofits. They give money to this. They give money to that. I mean, and certainly by having Ohio State athletes associated with their product, generally that's going to be a good thing. But I don't know. I mean, I've got a lot of thoughts about it, but I've also talked about it for 5 hours yesterday. So this is going to go down as the first true NIL in SD, because NIL was in play last year, but it was not the thing. It was still kind of new and still kind of being kicked around, and people were trying to figure out what was going on. Texas A&M kind of stole the show last year with its approach. That class has now scattered into the wind after that team did not come together properly. And everybody is lamenting how this player and that player and another player got away because Ohio State didn't have the bag.
Well, and the other thing is, even if Ohio State does start paying these guys, other schools are still going to pay more. Like, that doesn't mean you're going to get everybody you want. It just means that the cost will go up for the other school that ends up with that player. And so you're still going to have to find the guys that want to bet on themselves, because they still probably have to take less money to come to Ohio State, knowing that if they end up starting, the Lamborghini will be there. The endorsements will be there. But a lot of these guys don't have time to bet on themselves. Like, they've got, if they have an opportunity to help their family and you're trying to keep the lights on, I mean, that's what they're going to do, and they should do that.
Yeah, it is tough enough to recruit against the SEC and Notre Dame and USC coming into the league and all these various institutions just as things were. And then you add in the uphill climb of trying to match $1 million a year or whatever the figure is for that particular recruit when you've got 250 and you're trying to sell them on making up 3/4 of that. Like you say, to any one of us and just about everybody watching, we have typically, I'm guessing 99% of the time, taken the next job based on making more money, not based on making less money with the potential that in 3 years you may make more money. especially when how many of these players make it to the NFL? I know that they all have it in their head that they're going to make it to the NFL. But if somebody gets a hold of them and says, you know what, take the million over the 250 because I believe in you, but if it doesn't go well, you don't make the NFL. Hey, you just pocketed $1 million versus 250, and that sets you off in life a lot better place. Whew, yeah, it's not a. So the power brokers need to be getting together and figuring things out. That's all there is to it.
And I go on my rant every week about this, that, people say, oh, the damned NCAA doesn't have the rules. Again, it's the conference commissioners, the university presidents, the athletic directors who just can't come to a consensus on what the rules should be. And, this is what's become sad is that, we come on here to talk about football and football players. And now it's like we're talking about an NFL team with salary cap and, all this other dumb stuff. And that it kind of gives me a headache in the front of my head to where I really don't care. And that's just where I'm at. And I see a lot of apathy out there from the fan base too, that, oh, this is what it's devolved to. It's all about money and it's no longer about football. So I don't know. I guess you come to talk about football, we should talk about football. And there's going to be a game in a week or so. And, and have they changed the way this sport's perceived and the way that it's all conducted? Yes. But, I guess however you procure your players, you still got to develop them and go win football games. So, it's kind of where we're at.
It would be refreshing, and at this point, I wouldn't have said this months ago, but it would be refreshing if there was a salary cap, and then we would be like, okay, everybody's playing by the same rules. It's governed. It's set. There we go. Who can manage their money the best? There we go. Okay.
Well, why don't we just draft players at that point or assign players? And, I get it. I've heard people call for the salary cap, as a, how do we get our arms around this? But, may as well just start putting players on certain teams and at that point or whatever. I mean, it takes away certainly takes away the advantages that your top programs have and everything else. If you equalize the money or you assign players to teams, but it certainly takes away a lot of the joy and a lot of the fun. I mean, at least we're still sitting here talking about National Signing Day after it happened, even if there is a malaise amongst Buckeye Nation about, feeling like it ended with a bit of a splat because they weren't able to get Mateo Uyangale. Well, I got pretty close that time. Damon Wilson or, players like that. So, I don't know. What football needs less of is more changes. I think that's kind of where I'm at right now. I mean, it is in a constant state of change, and I don't know if a lot of them have been for the better. I wish we had a time machine to go back and tell the NC2A, the conference commissioners, the university presidents and chancellors, now is your time to fix the pay-for-play problem, because I come from a land where it's lawless and it's Mad Max running around with a bag of cash, giving it to players, and you aren't going to like what you're going to see.
My mind is going in like 84 different directions on where to take the rest of this topic. So we may default to Steve and say, hey, let's talk some football, because we could talk about this forever. And I've got a zillion different ideas that are probably not necessarily well thought out or legally binding or feasible. But
can I address the first question at the start of the show from Alpha Buckeye 06? What will it take for OSU to get a 5-star DB? Why is it so hard to get one at OSU? I will say they got one just last year in Sonny Styles. Now, will he play safety? Who knows? But there's only 5 in this year's class. So good luck getting those, and they're all from the Southeast and Texas. And there were 6 in last year's class. Ohio State got one of them. There were 2 in the class before that. So there's not a lot out there. I know you're probably thinking like, why couldn't they get Caleb Downs? And they had a great shot, but Alabama comes in and they do what they do. They're Alabama. And so it's going to be always difficult to get a limited pool where everybody in the nation is fishing in that pool And in the Southeast, they fish with dynamite, so we know that. And so it's tough to get anything out of that once everything has been exploded.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have Marshawn Lattimore in your backyard, I mean, you're having to go into somebody else's backyard and go try to swim in their pool. And while you may get away with it, sometimes it doesn't. The success rate may not be great, so it is difficult. It is a very limited amount of numbers. I mean, Ohio State did break through and get themselves a one tech in Caden McDonald out of the state of Georgia, and people will be like, "Yeah, well, did Georgia offer him?" Well, yes, Georgia did offer him. So this isn't just a case of a kid that just had a high star ranking and maybe not the offers. He had the hometown offer, but there are just not a lot of 5-star DBs. But I mean, I did see, I think it was Travis Howard, former Buckeye Travis Howard, asking why Ohio State has been having such a hard time getting top DBs. I thought this was BIA and everything else, and it's a different landscape and a different world than when Travis Howard and Maurice Claret and some of these other guys who have been very vocal on social media when they went through. I mean, some things are now out in the open, some things are probably still hidden, and there's a whole different set of issues probably out there that were not necessarily being dealt with back then.
I do get annoyed when I see the past players who didn't get to experience any of this saying, why aren't recruits going to Ohio State? And when it's Ohio guys, like I've seen Tyvis Powell, respect him. I've seen maybe Gary Ann Conley as well, another Ohioan, saying, why aren't recruits going to Ohio State? Those guys probably still would have gone to Ohio State because they're Ohioans. But I don't know that Travis Howard would have ended up at Ohio State and he was what a 3-star, like, so Ohio State found him. But if you're a 5-star or 4-star and you're being offered $300,000 to go to not Ohio State, like, that's why. Like, why aren't they getting all of these guys? That's why. And they didn't get them all to begin with. And it's been a while since they've gotten any. Like, it's not been a great stretch of recruiting in the secondary for Ohio State. 2021, they got 3 good corners. But a couple of years before, the 2 years before that, they didn't. And so this isn't just an NIL thing. This has also been a changeover of defensive staffs thing. But the NIL, they could have made up for some losses with some NIL. But again, you're still going, and Ohio State, if they're, as I said, if they're giving money to recruits, other schools are still going to give more money because they have it, and they may be. And they may be more desperate, like a Tennessee or a USC or whomever, where we need more talent, and Ohio State has a lot of talent. And I know Buckeye fans don't see it during game day, but there are other teams that need it more, like a Texas or whoever, and so they're gonna pay more. Auburn, for crying out loud, Miami, for crying out loud.
I'm looking at 3 defensive backs in the class, 2 corners and a safety, ranked 8, 11, and 16 at their position. So that's roughly 3 top 15 players.
And it's pretty standard.
And let's also look back. Tony talked about some years where they didn't have the highly rated guys, and that absolutely dealt with the coaching. I don't think Ryan Day really made a great hire in bringing Taver Johnson back, and Taver Johnson did not recruit at all. I mean, his recruiting was not very good. They bring in Kerry Combs. He brings in that class with all these highly rated defensive backs. People are ready to run him out on a rail because of the disaster of the defensive coordinator role and everything else. So recruiting is a relationship business, and Ohio State in the defensive backfield has gone through, several coaches in a pretty short period amount of time. And I can even loop this into offensive line recruiting, because people certainly are never happy with where offensive line recruiting is. You have to give it time, but the problem is that time is a commodity that there is less and less of because of the portal and everything else. And it used to be a coach needs to get 5 years to be able to have his own kids in there and everything else. We've seen head coaches fired in a year. A year, 2 years. And it's only going to get worse as you keep throwing NIL onto the fire like gasoline. You have the transfer portal on there like, gasoline. It's all going to explode.
Yakov 22 takes us on a sharp left turn here. This is the week of the 50th anniversary of the Immaculate Reception. Steelers Raiders. Franco Harris, of course, rest in peace, passed away in his sleep the other night. Yakov, I apologize because I know that you asked me this question the other night and I got busy answering other questions and I don't believe I ever got to it. I'll let Steve take the floor first on his memories of Franco Harris.
Well, yeah, he was a big part of all those great Pittsburgh Steeler teams. And as a Browns fan, they inflicted all kinds of pain and hurt and agony on me as I was growing up. Terry Bradshaw, Franco Harris, Rocky Blyer, John Stallworth, Lynn Swan, Benny Cunningham. I mean, that's your offense. Mike Webster was the center. I mean, they had a team, and then over on defense, Mean Joe Green and L.C. Greenwood. Mel Blunt. I mean, it was up and down the line. I mean, they had all pro guys at a lot of those positions. And Jack freaking Lambert, Jesus, forgot about him at linebacker. But man, they were the biggest thing coming and going in NFL football in the late 70s and even through the first year or two of the 1980s until they all got a little long in the tooth. But Franco was just Mr. Dependable. I mean, he was always going to get you that 5 yards. I mean, was he going to break off a big one? Maybe every other game or every once in a while, but that really wasn't his game. I wouldn't say he was even a plow horse, really. He was just kind of Mr. Dependable. I mean, he would just churn you out 5, 6, 7 yards, every play, and was just always there. I think. They were going to retire his number maybe or something and commemorate the anniversary of that play at their game this week. So how sad. I mean, 3 or 4 days before he was supposed to have that honor that it didn't, he passed away. So it'll be a little bit of a different ceremony, obviously, there for them this weekend in Pittsburgh. But yeah, just got to respect it. I assume he was on all 4 of their Super Bowl teams then. And, college, Penn State, I believe. I don't recall much about that. That was kind of before my time. But I think he's part of that lore as well.
Split time in the backfield at Penn State with Lydell Mitchell.
Okay.
And then he goes on to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that last Steelers Super Bowl championship team was the last NFL Super Bowl championship team where every player was originally drafted and signed by that team. There were no players on that team that played for any other teams at that point.
That's crazy.
My quick recollection of Franco Harris, at one point he had the all-time postseason record for yardage, rushing touchdowns, of course, played in the 4 Super Bowls, won an MVP, had the Super Bowl rushing record before Timmy Smith broke it. And there's one particular Super Bowl moment where Franco Harris was a very subdued, mellow player as a football player. And Hollywood Henderson threw down Terry Bradshaw in Super Bowl 13 after the whistle blew. And Franco Harris got up in Hollywood Henderson's face. And like this shocked the rest of the team because he just didn't do that. He got up in his face and then went to the huddle and said, "Give me the damn ball." And they gave it to him. Boom, like 22 yards for a touchdown right up the middle on a famous Steeler trap play.
Wow.
And the thing I remember about Franco Harris is he seemed to be the biggest running back that I remember, like, who rather than enforcing and initiating contact seemed to stutter step and kind of wait for he'd pick and choose his hole and kind of weave through. And he was known for running out of bounds a lot for players of that era as well. Don't want to cast a negative light because he was obviously a great player, tried to hang on with the Seattle Seahawks at the end of his career. But to gain the all-time rushing lead over Jim Brown, he was number 2 when he retired. All right, Yakov, we did the best we could. I could go on and on about the 1970s football and Franco Harris, but we'll get back to the Buckeyes. Let's do that. Highlights from the class before we move on to anything else. Kevin, why don't we start with you in regards to, you don't necessarily have to go to the top of the board because those are the guys that obviously are supposed to be the best players, but who do you really like out of this class?
But I do really like the players at the top of the board. Their receiver class is epic, and for all of the issues that people have with this class, and I understand that they got 20 and didn't go out and maybe get that immediate impact left tackle. Who, again, talking about numbers, there aren't really a lot of true freshman immediate impact left tackles to be had, and maybe you can go on and on and on. But the receiver class of Brandon Ennis, Carnell Tate, Noah Rogers, and Bryson Rogers is special. And you've got four guys out there that all complement each other. There's enough overlap that when you cross train them to play inside, outside, etc., that you've got it. But you certainly have your inside guys, you certainly have your outside guys, and it's just another feather in the cap of Brian Hartline for being able to go out and put together a great class. Last year's class had some high rankings in there with the four receivers they brought in there, but they haven't had a chance to really break through on the field. You're going to have a glut of 8 guys now that are going to be all pushing to try and get out there. I mean, there's not going to be the Jackson Smith and Jigba question anymore. We know where that one stands. And while you got guys like Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka back, people are going to question whether or not Julian Fleming, what his status is going to be. But, let's just say he's back. Receiver is going to be really deep. So, so I don't take all of the highlights. I'm just going to focus on the receivers, and that's where your pair of 5-stars are with Tate and Ennis. But Noah Rogers out of Roseville, North Carolina, out near Raleigh, he could end up being the best of the bunch, and that's not taking anything away from the other Rogers, Tate and Ennis. That's just saying that Noah Rogers may be criminally underrated, in my opinion.
Yeah, Noah Rogers reminds me of Michael Thomas, and he's an outside guy, but can play inside as well, and he's dynamite with the slant and catches tough balls and is a 50-50 guru, as our buddy
He's
Tim
a guru.
But I'll go to Ohio safety Malik Hartford, about 6'3", 175, 180 pounds, tons of range, really big hitter, solid tackler, triggers well, helps out in run support, can cover ground. So I think he's a guy that in this safety-driven defense will be a guy that is eventually a free safety back there, patrolling and controlling things. And I think with what they've done with their safeties, maybe Jaden Bonsu is the strong safety of the group. He's a thumper, 6'1", 210, can help out in the run game. I don't know, is Cedric Hawkins maybe the nickel in this three-pronged attack? Maybe we'll see what he can do. But I really like Hartford. He's a violent guy. He had the hit of the year in high school football this past year. If you go ahead and go to YouTube and type in Malik Hartford after this show, you'll see what I'm talking about, or maybe just open up another browser and keep it muted. But he's a guy that is a big hitter and is a smart football player.
Yeah, I think Brian Hartline obviously outdid himself again. He's had 3 or 4 of these classes in a row now where he gets 2 or 3 receivers that are in the national top 100. I think his big one was the Smith Najigba, Julian Fleming, Mookie Cooper, and whoever the other guy was. That maybe was that G maybe. 4 guys in the top 100 that one year, and then he just he had Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka. And then last year's guys, really didn't break through this season on the field, but, there's a lot of good talent there with those guys he signed last year, 3 or 4 guys, Burton Brown, Antwi, and Kion Grays, I think was the 4th one. So he struck again. They give him 4 spots every year, and he comes back with 3 top 100 guys. And I guess Bryson Rogers, who's maybe the throw in here, he's got Ohio ties back to Warren, Ohio, and was a Buckeye all about it from the word go as soon as they got interested in him. And Brandon Ennis picked up the ball, as a Florida guy and ran with it and helped recruit players to be part of this class as well. So it was really interesting. We got to see Carnell Tate up close at the camp last year, and he seems like another really good player as well. So a great wide receiver haul. I think a pretty good offensive line haul. I mean, you didn't recruit Orlando Pace or Paris Johnson in this class, but you did get Luke Montgomery, who's the number 50 overall player thereabouts, give or take, in the country, and could play almost any of the 5 offensive line positions. Not sure how he's done a whole lot at center, but I guess they're talking about starting him out or beginning his career at tackle. Miles Walker, I think, is also going to begin his career at tackle. And the other two, Sierraveld and Padilla, if I'm wrong, correct me, guys. I think they're going to be the guards, but maybe Sierraveld. I don't know. But a pretty good haul on the offensive line as well for Justin Fry, taking over from Stu Rawa and kind of maintaining and getting some guys there. I want to see, how the defensive line group pans out. Will Smith is a very hardworking player from Dublin Kaufman, obviously a legacy from Will Smith Sr. And, I have an interview on our site with him, courtesy of our friends at Channel 4, who went to his signing day and taped an interview with him, and he couldn't stop smiling. That's how excited he was to be able to sign his letter of intent. And it appeared they had one of his dad's old Ohio State jerseys there. And, it's a very poignant situation for him. Lost his dad, 6 years ago, 2016. It just seems like it was yesterday. He was killed in a road rage incident down in New Orleans. And now the son is going to get a chance to follow in the footsteps of his dad. I'm old enough to remember Will Smith. He was from Utica, New York, the dad. And as I recall, I think it was Jim Haycock and Fred Pugich went up there and recruited him to come to Ohio State. Turns out he's a national champion, key contributor on the 2002 team, an All-American in 2003. When they were doing the ceremony for the champions at the Schottenstein Center, they drowned out whatever he was trying to say by saying, one more year. And sure enough, Big 93 came back for that one more year. Little did we know it was going to be just like what happened in 2015, where repeating is seemingly much more difficult than winning it the year before. But Will Smith, great Buckeye, and we're going to find out if his son, is going to carry the same kind of level, or maybe even better as a defensive tackle for the Buckeyes in the years to come. So excited to see that. He's the only guy from the 614 in this class, which is crazy. There are 7 Ohio guys in the class. They've only taken 6 each of the last 2 years. I think Day took 8 in his 2020 class. So, we're not quite to Jim Tressel where you sign 24 and 11 or 12 of them are from Ohio, but, we're inching back up there just a little bit.
When I noticed that 5 of those players out of the state of Ohio ranked in the top 200 by 247 Sports. So that seems to be fairly healthy for the Buckeye State, at least at the top end.
Yeah, I think the flip of that is that Ohio may have only had one guy in the top 100, which is almost unheard of. Montgomery may have been the only guy in the top 100. So, Ohio, I don't know what to say about. Some of it is SEC or, Southern bias by the Raiders, but, that's where the talent is. That's where you got to be.
Jason Moore at 65, according to 247. Defensive line. Oh, I'm sorry. He's out of Maryland. What am I talking about?
He's out of the Catholic.
Mark Fletcher is the top 10 running back out of Fort Lauderdale that at one point Ohio State had a hold of, but he goes to Miami. PAT Effect says, how does Tony Alford still have a job? Cannot sign a single running back.
I've had this question asked to me, and pause for effect. You had Mark Fletcher for all of this time. You had your back. You had a back that really was saying one thing. Oh, I'm great having a second back in this class, but really didn't want a second back in this class. So how do you continue recruiting other running backs while you have Mark Fletcher? Mark Fletcher jumps out of the class, and then where are you supposed to go? You got 2 options. You can either sit there and go swinging in the state of Ohio and see what you can flip around there, or you can look nationally. So there's still I think they're still looking in on Jamarian Wilcox, who apparently didn't sign yesterday. Looks like he might end up going to Kentucky. At least that's where all of the prognosticators have him going. They kicked the tires on Justice Haynes. They kicked the tires on a couple other guys.
Sperling.
So, huh?
The kid from Hoban.
I'm working on it. So then Lamar Sperling, Mr. Football in Ohio, they kicked the tires there, did not offer him. So Ohio State made the decision not to offer him. He ends up signing with Buffalo. Ohio State kicked the tires on Trey Cornist, who ended up signing with Tulane. There were a couple other backs. There was the kid out of Ironton that ended up going to Wisconsin. There were a couple of other. You don't take a running back just to take a running back. That's not fair to the kid. If you're sitting there bringing somebody in that you don't believe can be an Ohio State running back, bring them in, have them locked down for a year or 2 years, and then say, well, we got this big, beautiful portal over here. You should take a look at it, and push them right into it. So this is, how do you not sign a single running back? The way you don't sign a running back is when you sit there and have one committed for the vast majority of the cycle, and then he bails on you. There's no reason to force it at that point. So, I mean, Ohio State, we don't know if anybody might portal out. We don't know if Mayan Williams is going to go to the league at this point, but they've got plenty of backs. I mean, remember, Evan Pryor is going to be coming off of injury. Alan Hayden, Ryan Day spoke about potentially moving Chip Trainum back to running back full-time. They have to make a decision where that's going to fit best. It's not like they were down to 2 scholarship backs and had to take not only 1 but 2 backs. But I just feel like that comment is intellectually dishonest.
Appreciate everybody being here at the Voice of College Football every typically Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, but these guys were just a bit busy on National Signing Day, of course. So we moved to Thursday as we often do. That's why it's important to subscribe. Hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live. Let's go around the
Mark,
horn here.
Well, yeah. you're talking about the in-state talent, and yesterday I went through and looked at the top 200 and the 24/7 composite. Ohio has 5 of those guys in the top 200. The state of Alabama has 12 in the top 100, 15 in the top 200. The footprint of the Ohio State recruiting aspect in the Big Ten of Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, Pennsylvania has 13 total top 200 guys. The state of Alabama has more than that. Florida has 43. Texas has 36. Georgia has 14. Like, just in Ohio State's recruiting footprint, other southeastern states have multiples of what Ohio State has in their footprint. And then so you go down south and you're battling all of those other southern schools, and it's a lot easier to keep somebody south than to bring them north.
That was the biggest wake-up call to me in looking over numbers, let's say, a year ago. I knew about Georgia, that Georgia was coming and has basically displaced California's number 3. But to look at Alabama was the state that, Louisiana's been really strong for years and years and decades. But Alabama, and seeing, and adding it up and seeing that it's surpassed Ohio significantly, that took me back a bit.
Well, even Pennsylvania has just 1 player in the 200, in the top 200 this year, which, Pennsylvania used to be Georgia in terms of, now this is 15, 20 years ago, but they're no longer. I mean, Indiana has 2 top 200 guys, and twice as many as the state of Pennsylvania. But it's just, and now with NIL being so out in the open, and we talked about this on our stream yesterday, the Southeast has always had the money cannons, but now, like, the infrastructure for NIL has been there forever, and now it's able to be out in the open. Ohio State is still trying to figure out their infrastructure for NIL. Not that, because the $100 envelopes and handshakes in the North is not quite the same level. It's like dirt roads to the Autobahn, basically, in terms of infrastructure between the 2 regions.
So down there in bootlegging country, they already knew how to make shine. So now that it's all legal or whatever, they already have a head start because they've been making shine for years.
Yeah. They built NASCAR that way. So basically, are we looking just at a simple population shift? Because that's we already know that Ohio is basically just barely growing. The state of
Yeah.
Ohio. I think I say
Look at
Ohio.
the state of Ohio and where the talent comes from. Cleveland is dry. Cleveland is dry. I mean, funny, Cleveland is dry, yet Glenville seems to have kids right now. But where does the talent come from out of the state of Ohio? I mean, it's not coming out of Cleveland right now.
So that was going to be my step 2 to the question was going to be, okay, we know that states like North Carolina and Georgia and Florida are exploding in population, but Ohio is not like last in population growth. There are states all over the place that are decreasing in population. Ohio is slowly growing based on the numbers that I've seen recently. So is it population shift plus also just not as much money, resources, quality coaching being put into these Ohio high school football programs?
This is also assuming rankings are 100% accurate. And I think a lot of this is where your scouts are, that's where your players are. And I go back to maybe 5-8 years ago, I was reading the ESPN recruiting thing, and they're like, the breakdown of their scouts, there's 1 in the Midwest and 8 in the Southeast. So where are you going to find more players? Like, where are you going to find more rankings, players to be ranked? And I think you still have that. And you also have the belief that players in the Southeast are, and Kevin can speak to this better because he's been part of it, but there's an assumption that, or a benefit of the doubt for players in the Southeast that players in the Midwest don't get.
Well, I mean, I got in all sorts of trouble working at corporate for one of the recruiting services and pounded the table and said that they were not, that they were disrespecting the Midwest and that you had one guy covering 8 Midwest states and I don't think they had 8 guys in the Southeast, and you're not getting out and seeing these kids, and you're just evaluating guys off of, this was back in the day before Huddle Online and things like that you're just off of the VHS tapes and DVDs that were getting sent in and CD-ROMs, probably not even DVDs at that point, probably CD-ROMs that were coming in. So, yeah, we take these rankings as if they're absolute. And the thing is that either if you work for a network or you work for a network, you're friends with a lot of these analysts, and you don't want to be like, well, they don't know what the hell they're talking about, but they make mistakes too. I mean, there's a reason why every year all these services come out and do these are the kids that we obviously missed on or whatever. And, so it's good that they do that, but we see plenty of 3-star kids that end up going on and doing great things. Every year at the NFL draft, there's undoubtedly going to be the 0-star kid, which is a huge misconception. A 0-star kid means the kid was unranked. Not that somebody said, this kid is the worst football player ever. We're going to if we could give him -4 stars, we would make him a -4. No, he just wasn't ranked. He is not a 0-star. He's not below a 2-star. They need to quit using that term. They should say he was unranked. But the point being is we can't take the rankings as absolute. People are like, what do you think of this recruiting class? Talk to me in 3 years and I may have a better idea.
Well, and the NFL still goes first-round quarterbacks are what? I don't know, 50-50? Like, do teams bat 500 on first-round quarterbacks? And they have like more proof they have more evidence than anybody that this guy's going to be successful. And so many aren't.
Yeah, the audition in college football is so much more valid than the audition for college in high school. No question about that. It can't be, to Kevin's point about the lack of perfection in the evaluation process, is there's no way that the coaching in the Big Ten can be that much better than other conferences, because regardless of how great the SEC is, the Big Ten still produces the second best recruiting classes and recruiting rankings of the teams, and then 3 to 4 years later produces the second most NFL draft selections. I think we're around 330 or 40 SEC players in the NFL and around 260, 270 for the Big Ten, and then it drops from there. So the Big Ten consistently produces the second best results on the field, and in the NFL. Therefore, the likes of Wisconsin, the coaching at Wisconsin and Iowa and Minnesota at their very best, but I'll leave them out. Basically, those other two can't be so great that they're just taking, just these kids kicking bales of hay and make them NFL players. Iowa has the 6th most NFL players right now. There's no way that their coaching has been that good, especially watching their offense over the last 5 years, that their coaching has been that good to produce that many NFL players out of nothing.
Sir, you will be hearing from one Brian Ferentz.
You should apologize, Mark. I
I've heard from representatives of Jack Cohn, so come on.
The 44-time Big Ten Coach of the Year. Had they beaten Nebraska, you would have got it again. I mean, it would have been, came down to one game.
The question here from the most recent question from Carl Sagasser, 2525. Who was the last Ohio lineman that went to Michigan that went on to be great at Michigan? We were talking about that yesterday on I don't know if it was after the stream, but Kyle Kalis was a starter, but he never emerged as that 5-star offensive tackle that they wanted, and he ended up being a guard. So maybe him, and that was 2012 they're going to lose some guys to Ohio from Ohio to Michigan in the 2024 class. So we'll see if those guys end up hurting them, because I don't even remember, like, the guards in 2013, 14, 15 were pretty good for Ohio State. So I don't even know that Kyle Kalis would have played for the Buckeyes or would have started.
Yeah.
So
Ferris, we love you, but Brady and Breeze, not the best example of what I was talking about. Brady's from California, Breeze is from Texas. But we appreciate the effort.
And a JUCO, if I recall correctly, right? Was he a JUCO?
It might have been. That does ring a bell.
I could be confusing him with Billy Dicken, the first Drew Brees.
Oh, yes.
But Midwest bred, baby, or Midwest developed,
Yes, Billy Dicken was the first Joe Tiller quarterback to break through and win a bowl game. And absolutely. Good stuff there. So do you guys have we'll start with Tony, any different thoughts, different perspective on this upcoming matchup with Georgia than you did once it was announced? Has anything happened? Anything been said? Obviously, nothing happened of consequence that we know about. Behind closed doors is where they're practicing, of course. But any additional perspective as you dig deeper into this one?
Watching Georgia's offense, they're versatile. They'll throw to backs and tight ends and receivers, so they throw the ball around, which means you have to stay disciplined as a defense. And when we talk to the players this past week or last week, whenever it was, they talked about just doing your job, being disciplined, and how they didn't do that against Michigan. They know they didn't, and they know they need to do it against Georgia. So they know what they need to do, but can they actually go and do it? And when I say can they, and the it in that is, can you just be disciplined and just do your job? And with Stetson Bennett and his ability to escape and roll out, there's going to be some secondary issues, some scramble drill type of things where the guys in the secondary just have to let the front seven take care of things. And the guys in the secondary just have to stay back and stay with the receivers. And if Stetson Bennett beats you for a 70-yard run, that's better than him throwing over the top of you for a 70-yard touchdown, because that 70-yard run is much less likely to happen, and it may only happen once in a game. But if you bite on him and you come up, that 70-yard touchdown will happen 5 times like it did against Michigan. Like 2 of those are runs. But if you come up on him, they're going to break free. And so I would say just stay back and let the front 6, front 7 handle things.
Yeah, I watched some of the Tennessee-Georgia game before we did our show. And then I think early in the first half, it was 3rd down at the 13-yard line. And he got blitzed up the middle and made the Tennessee blitzer miss, and then rolled out and kept the play alive, and finally said, well, the heck with this, and took off and shook the linebacker at the 2-yard line and dove for the pylon. And then there was a 6-minute break so that they could review the play. How the two guys standing there 10 feet away couldn't see that he never went out of bounds until the ball hit the pylon, I don't know. But it took him like 6 minutes to ascertain that that was a touchdown. Not only was it a touchdown, it was a spectacular touchdown, I have to tell you. So I was having Sunshine Lawrence flashbacks on, Zach Harrison trailing Sunshine Lawrence going down the field, the whole route. And I don't know. Is Ohio State going to keep him in the pocket? They really didn't do a good job of that against Toledo. And, Michigan, that guy, kept plays alive and picked them apart. So I don't know. I guess we'll, again, add that to the list. I mean, I did it's really crazy. You guys will appreciate this. I'm on 97.1 The Fan yesterday with Matty Ice and DeVere Posey in the afternoon after signing day. And we really only talked about the recruits for about a minute. Most of it was about Ohio State and Georgia. And they're like, Steve, what are your overall thoughts? I'm like, well, this seems to me, and DeVere, this was a year before DeVere got there, was the LSU game when they went down, played LSU in their home turf in New Orleans and lost 38-24. And they had, what was it? Gave up 5 sacks to Todd Beckman, 3 turnovers, 3 personal fouls. That kind of mimics what we just saw in the Michigan game, just how unclean they were playing football. They're like, can you dare to dream that there'd be a rematch with Michigan? I'm like, well, first of all, Michigan's got to beat TCU, which I know they're a touchdown favorite, but, they've got to go out and win. And Ohio State, to me is walking 5 miles uphill in the snow here in this one, trying to go into Atlanta and beat Georgia. Are they going to play a clean football game? Are they not going to headbutt a guy and make it 1st and 35? Are they going to have 3 or 4 pre-snap penalties because there's 150 decibels inside the dome? Are they going to make terrible defensive play calls and not be in position? Are they going to whiff on tackles? I mean, there's a laundry list of things that they have to clean up just to be in this game, let alone try and win it. So I don't know. I don't mean to sound all doom and gloom, but man, it's kind of doomy and gloomy around here. I don't know.
For me, I've written Tale of the Tape. I've not run it. I've not even gone through and edited it yet, so I need to see if it makes sense. So look for that coming up in the next week. But I went through the Georgia defense, and it's a lot. It's frightening, but I have to remind myself as I write it that I'm also looking at things if things come in at 100%. Nobody ever plays a 100% game, so all of these things are all right. What level do you get of each of these things? And then looking at the Georgia offense, looking at the Georgia offense, I'm every bit as impressed as I thought I would be with Brock Bowers and Darnell Washington. Think about Zach Harrison being out there as a tight end. Darnell Washington and Zach Harrison are about the same weight. Darnell Washington's an inch taller than Zach Harrison, maybe 2. So that's a scary proposition, but Georgia has never really utilized them the way that you would expect. If you have a cheat code out there, if you have a unicorn, I would figure that they would use them more. Lad McConkey, we'll see if he is able to go. I mean, people are saying he should, but I've started calling him Lad Sanzenbacher because, he's a good player. He's going to make you plays, but does he jump off of the screen? No, not really. And then looking at their running game, I'm much more concerned about Kenny McIntosh, the pass catcher, than I am Kenny McIntosh, the running back. So I do see a scenario. I do see situations of where Ohio State wins this game, but the Ohio State that needs to show up to win the game, I haven't seen in the last several games. So can Ohio State find – I don't even necessarily want to go back to the Penn State game. And, that Penn State game was kind of maybe that was the outlier where, it took a huge effort by JT Tuimoloau to, 2 interceptions, a pick 6 on one of them, a forced fumble, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think you need to see a lot more of the Ohio State team that went to Penn State than the Ohio State team that putzed around with Maryland, that lost to Michigan, that didn't really seem to have it, even though the conditions were horrible at Northwestern. They need a little bit of a time machine to go back and find that earlier season form.
I'm sure if any one of us stood next to Brock Bowers, it would look like he could grind us into dust with his thumb. And when he lines up like in a 2 tight end set next to Darnell Washington like dwarfs him. Like he is a mountain of a man, Darnell Washington. Absolutely.
I think it was, I forget which game it was that I was watching, but they were throwing a little swing pass out to Kenny McIntosh, and Washington was the lead blocker on that. And like the poor defensive back that was out there trying to defend just got crumpled, and he like gave up like as Darnell Washington blocked out the sun, and he just went down. And you know he's got a few of those where it's not fair. And as a blocker, he's almost as big as Orlando Pace and runs like Ricky Dudley to throw back to some old Ohio State old school stuff like that. And they don't throw it to him as much as they threw to Ricky Dudley, but they use him as an extra tackle as much as Orlando Pace was out there as a left tackle.
CBS did their mock draft, and just to give you an idea of the talent that's going to be on the field, looks like Ohio State will have 3 first-rounders playing in the game, and Georgia will have at least 4. And one of them, Nolan Smith, is not going to play, a linebacker from Georgia, torn pectoral. But they had Jalen Carter as the number 2 overall pick at defensive tackle. He's number 88. In this Tennessee game, he hit the quarterback in the end zone and caused a fumble. This is a play that, you know, had this been a close game, I think a lot of people would be referring to this. I mean, they ended up winning the game by 2 touchdowns. But he fumbled it. Tennessee offensive lineman recovered it and fell down, and the ball, his entire side is on the ground, and he's not to the goal line, and he releases the ball out onto the field of play, and then one of his teammates recovers it. And the officials, again, after an 8-minute break, and Gary Danielson and Gene Serator are in total agreement, this is a safety. They somehow ruled it was a fumble out of the end zone by the lineman who recovered the fumble that was created by Jalen Carter, and then they punted it away. Well, they win the game anyway, but, you know, 2 points isn't that big of a deal anyway. But Jalen Carter is that kind of an impact guy, and he could be involved in a scoring play in this game if Luke Whippler and the boys in the middle aren't quite up to snuff. So Keely Ringo, it's curious. He was a star last year for them at corner, and I talked to our Georgia publisher, said this guy's given up a ton of big plays, including the LSU game. He got torched time and time again. So, you know, number 5 overall pick. Is this Sevyn Banks, or is this insert name of best corner Ohio State's produced in the last 10 years? I don't know. Not sure what to make of that. Broderick Jones, left tackle, is number 17. And the guy you guys are talking about, Darnell Washington, is, it says here, number 19. So that's 4 guys that they're going to have on the field who are in the top 20 picks of the NFL draft. Ohio State's got obviously Stroud, who the CBS had as the number 6 pick. They had the number 1 was the quarterback from Alabama, the Heisman Trophy winner last year, and he's number 1. And then, of course, Paris Johnson is a first rounder. And they curiously have DeJuan Jones at like 29 or 30 here. So Warren has not come out and said he's leaving. He did walk on senior day. And I think that it is, you know, foregone conclusion that DeJuan,
he's gone.
Yeah, he is, as Kev likes to say, he gone. However, Matthew Jones too. Matthew Jones walked on senior day too. If he's also 2 feet out the door, but yeah. So yeah.
Jalen Carter, we already know that he can hold up a quarterback with one arm and, you know, signal number 1. Maybe he's going to try to switch arms against CJ Stroud. I don't know. It's pretty impressive. All right. What's also impressive is that these guys show up each and every week for us here on Buckeyes Live and deliver as they do on their own sites and platforms. So we start with one Tony Gerdeman. Tony, what do you got available?
Yeah, just you can find me at BuckeyeHuddle.com, on Twitter at Tony Gerdeman. I have been doing a daily Peach Bowl notebook from quotes from the players, so I'll throw another one of those out there today at some point. Also, check out our new YouTube channel for Buckeye Huddle. It's a CFB Playbook, so you can find that at youtube.com/@CFB Playbook. And we'll be adding more and more to that down the road, but it's going to be a national channel type of thing, talking about the sport as a whole, X's and O's, things like that. So give that a subscription. Just subscribe there, and we'd appreciate that.
Kevin.
Yeah, everything Tony said about CFP Playbook as well. And you can find me at Kevin_Noon on Twitter, the Big Meat Kickoff podcast as well at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle, and all of your favorite podcasting outlets. And when it comes to what I'm working on, as I said, I've knocked out 2 pieces. Both of them are tail of the tape, just more in depth. So breaking it into 2, probably going to run that after the holiday. I also am trying to work with some of Georgia's opponents from this year to get some insight on what they saw in going against the Bulldogs. Still trying to pull teeth to get a couple more replies before I write it. And, of course, we'll have plenty of stuff coming up once we get to Atlanta.
Folks, we know you're lazy. I am too. I get it. Ferris, thank you so much for subbing to College Football Playbook. We have left the link right there in the chat. So just grab the link. You go right there. Boom. Sub. Check out the videos. Steve.
Not much really going on with the holiday now coming up. And obviously the team's done practicing. And we'll all be reconnecting down in Georgia. Some of us getting there the 25th. I get there very late on the 26th, and the first in-person interviews there on the 27th, and we'll have 4 days of that leading up to the game on the 31st. And we are contemplating doing a meet and greet potentially there in Atlanta with people from our site, and throw it out there for anybody else. And as far as next week's schedule, I'm not sure what we've got going on a week from today on the 29th, but I don't know. We may have to get creative with trying to schedule around a practice availability or something like that next Wednesday. But maybe get into heavy game preview mode next week and less about paying the players.
Merry Christmas to all of you and happy holidays.
Merry freaking Christmas.
And we've got a Notre Dame live stream coming up, National Signing Day, here in about 2 minutes. That's over on the main channel. So join us there with our guy Brian from Irish Breakdown. Guys, we appreciate all that you do. Thanks, and safe travels and happy holidays.
Happy holidays.